You're listening to a Skewed Orbit original podcast.
Time, weather, and always pass.
Hi friends, it's me, Rachel LaForce. This is an audio-only intro-outro. As many of you know, as I'm coming to you live, I have survived and thrived many things this winter. Certainly in this last week, it was taping my first 30-minute, half-hour comedy special. Did I just do ATM, right? Where it's like half-hour comedy special, 30 minutes. It's the same thing. And then I've got my son, Teddy, turned 1. We had all this family in town, big celebration. So this week I realized I needed a super special intro and outro for this episode. And unfortunately did not have the time to get in studio, but this feels even more intimate, just me to you. This is such a special episode for me. I interviewed my mom. And my mom and I have had a really beautiful relationship with a lot of ups and downs, both because we both have been growing in the process. My mom, my whole life, has always said, the only difference between you and I is 24 years. That's it. And, you know, now knowing that I had my first child at 35 and I was still like, what? I do what now? My mom was 24. So the perspective I have now of her choices, the things that she got through on the other side, the things that she stands for, the people that she advocates for, the growth that she's done on herself, I'm just really in awe and in admiration. And this episode is really a lot about generational healing and doing the work and what does that mean? And, you know, similarly, just like my mom, she's a healer in the way of that she's a teacher and she has been a nurse practitioner for many years. I don't know, she has like 9 degrees or something. We go over it in the episode and she's just a force to be reckoned with. And the fact that she is doing the work in certain capacities, just as I'm doing the work in other capacities. So I am so excited for you to hear this intimate, beautiful conversation with me, my mom, Dr. Painter. So, Mom, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Did you ever think that you would be recording a podcast with me in this room when we moved into this house?
Never.
Yeah. There's been, well, this was your room for a while when we first moved in. So when you're coming down to visit, now it's my office. Yeah. It was my room in 6th and 7th grade before I got too scared. I didn't want to be down here anymore. So that's why I always tell people now, Alex's office is what my high school bedroom was.
Right.
Lots of secrets. I'm just kidding. There's no secrets. It would be cool if there were secrets. And then what
you
else?
You were too chicken to run out of the house at night.
Yeah, I'm not going anywhere. Are you kidding? I'm afraid of the dark. Well, you know that. Where was if anybody in high school wanted their parents to not be suspicious, they would say that they were sleeping at my house. Because they're like, oh, of course Rachel isn't going to do anything bad. So I was the scapegoat for everybody. That's who I was. What else has been? Roommates?
Oh, yeah. We've had a lot of water over the dam over the years.
Anybody else? I think that's it.
Yeah. 30 years we've been here.
Long time. And now we record this podcast from here.
Yes, we do.
We're healing the masses. Okay, so thank you for saying yes to coming. You just did a podcast recently, so now you're a regular. Yeah. So why I wanted to have you on, obviously, because this podcast is all about, the tagline is that healing is hilarious, right? And it's all about how the way I believe that healing is portrayed in the media is either like eat, pray, love, which Elizabeth Gilbert, do we love you? Come on the podcast. We love you. But it's this very kind of like glossy experience in a lot of ways, or it's very clinical. And the clinical version is like, you were sick and now you're healed, like both physically and mentally. I mean, forget spiritually. We're not even there yet. So both, obviously, you were the generation before me, and you had a lot to work through to be able to get to where I could do some more work. And then hopefully Jonah and Teddy are almost in the clear. I don't know. And so, yeah, I just wanted to hear like what that experience has been for you, and really talking to how much it's always ongoing and how much is happening. And, you know, you recently lost a parent, I lost a grandparent, and then re-navigating that relationship. Now, I mean, we don't have to talk about grandma, but you know, how all those relationships change. And every time they change, how we enter, it's like we're in a new room, but somehow we're in the same house, but we're in a new room. You don't have to answer all these things at once, just giving you.
Good, because I'm not taking notes. Yes.
But just setting up for the audience, like that's really kind of what we're going to talk about, and like what that experience is like, and then how that has found its mainstay in your work and in your passion.
Okay, so where do I begin? I would say one of the things that I do quite often is I dream about this house. And I'll have dreams where there's different rooms and new rooms that I never knew existed. And I'm like, how can I have been in this house for 30 years and I never knew this other room was here? And so, you know, other than childhood home I grew up in, this has certainly been the longest house that I've been in. And I know that metaphorically, that means that there's still places within myself that I have to discover. Now you guys are here taking it to the next level. And it's just, I guess, parts of myself or the different rooms, you know, like, what do I got going on in there? You know, what's going to happen when we get over there? But I would say, as far as you're concerned, I think it's just all really cool that now you're here and your boys are here. And now we're going to do another generation here. And I think that's really awesome in the physical house, but also in the spiritual house.
Yeah, I'm interested if this has happened for you, and you probably know some of this, but like my joke is always that I'm like the spiritual version of like a Nancy Meyers movie. Right. You know Nancy, she's in Father Bride, all of our favorite movies. Something's got to give, because they're always very clean. Like the beginning always meets the end, which is just basic storytelling. Thank you so much, Miss Myers. But that I was like, all the parts of my healing journey have been almost like so not beautifully succinct, because it's been an effing wild ride and I've about lost my damn mind a few times. But when you allow it, how all of a sudden then you're like, boom, it's like, wow, that really is full circle. Like to the extent that's so aggressive that you like want to go up to other people on the street and be like, has this happened to you? Like the first apartment that I lived in LA, and then I lived with like 4 different roommates. I feel like I lived 9 lives, all in that apartment, but different roommates that came and went.
Correct.
And then I left and moved out with boyfriend, and then went through a whole unraveling of self, of life, got sober, all that stuff, met Alex, and then miraculously ended up in that exact same apartment with Alex like 3 years later, where it was almost like the universe was like, okay, let's try this again. So how sacred like that physical place was. And then that's the same for this place. Because there's no reason why we should still be here. This house has been up for sale multiple times.
Under contract a few times.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I was reflecting back on that too, doing a lot of reflection this morning. But one of the things that I always wanted when I had this house was that I thought I would have more children. And I always thought about boys being in the creek. And I remember when you had your 7th grade birthday party and all those boys came, it was your first boy-girl party. And the girls ran in to play makeup and stuff here in your room, and the boys ran right out to the creek. And I was like, yeah, this is what I wanted, you know? So I also feel like this is a sacred place because, you know, the Civil War, the soldiers marched down Soap Creek. It's right outside the door. There's a lot of spiritual energy here, you know? So I do believe in that kind of recycling and coming up with a new plan. You know, I feel like we set the sacred space. I set the sacred space first. You came second, and now we'll be open to the boys doing some. I don't think they need to do healing. They haven't been traumatized yet, but at least.
Let's hope not, okay? Other than Teddy shoving, or Jonah shoving Teddy down all the time recently.
Yeah, but I hope that we created a safe space here, a sacred space here. but generations before us certainly have too.
But do you feel, that's beautiful. Do you feel like, have you had those full circle moments in your own healing journey of like either people that have revisited or spaces? Like, have you had any of those?
Certainly. I believe fully with, my dad dying recently that you're revisiting a lot of things. That's still pretty raw for me. It's just been a few weeks. But, like I was telling you, one of the reasons I moved home was I had certain things that I wanted to work out, and yet the universe had bigger plans, and I ended up kind of circling through things that I wasn't prepared for, but it was exactly what was going to happen. I mean, just that I went home 9 years ago, and, Dad worked until October 1st of this year at 95. Like, who knew that he would hang on for 9 years and be perfectly healthy until the last few weeks? So I was able to have a lot of time with him that I never had before because he was with me for so long. And even going back to my house, which my parents were in for 62 years, there were times when we had Dad there that I was waiting upstairs for him to get finished with something. And I was like, I never noticed that cabinet over there. I never noticed that wall went like that. Like, there were things that I slowed down, even though I grew up in that house. I was there for 62 years. I had a lot of time to just be and be fully present. And I was able to remember a lot of childhood memories, and different people that came through the house to care for him too would say the same thing. Like, I haven't been this quiet in this house in 40 or 50 years. So I think all of us as a family were moving through that. Family friends were moving through that, because during a transitional phase like that, you have to be fully present and everything is quiet. And it gave me an opportunity to kind of come full circle, see things differently than I saw them before, and have some time to reflect on that. Was really a great part, a beautiful part of being with him for 10 weeks. I think it was probably the first time I slowed down as much as I did throughout my entire career.
Well, probably since you had me.
Yeah.
Because there was actually like hands-on having to,
Yeah, but I didn't even know what I was doing when I had you. So
I mean,
hopefully I knew what I was doing this time around. But I do know, that one of the goals I always had, certainly I didn't walk on water and I wasn't perfect at things and made some mistakes along the way. But one of the things I was always aware of is that I wanted to stay one step ahead of you. I wanted to do the work because I didn't want to transfer that down. And I truly believe I put my whole heart into healing. It's just not something that happens overnight, And I've often said that you are really the only person in my life who's been with me through all of that, because I've had various transitions in relationships, but you were a witness to all of that work that I was doing along the way. You're the only one.
That's interesting.
Neck and neck.
What an honor. Well, do you think, what is it like for you now? Like, when you see me like reading Marianne Williams and Louise Hayes, I'm like, Mom, you're not going to believe this. And you're like, yeah, I read that in like 94.
Yeah. And it's Marianne Williamson. But anyway.
What did I say?
Marianne Williams.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Williamson. Well, I have often said that I don't really see, much of a difference between what you do for a living and what I do. I'm a therapist. I'm an academic. I talk about healing a lot. You just get to be funny about it.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it's hard for people to understand that if you don't find the humor in all of this, it can get really dark, And I think that's always why I've done therapy, teaching, writing, to kind of mix it up a bit, because, the work that we do is hard when we're doing it, and then when we're taking it all in at the same time. But I can't crack jokes like you can crack jokes. But sometimes I'm thinking, this is really funny.
Yeah.
And finding that humor and holding people still long enough to find that joy and that laughter in their own experience, because we fall so fast that it can get really heavy, and we don't enjoy the ride through the pain. And we need to enjoy the ride through the pain, I think.
Yeah, sister, quote it. Quote it. I know, I agree. That is so much. Again, this podcast is Healing is Hilarious. That I think so many people are so scared. And I always say this as a disclaimer. I do not believe that, my joke is it's not the trauma Olympics, but I am always careful of being trauma informed and knowing that some of the trauma that people have to relive or get in touch with in order to get to the other side, there are varying degrees. I think of the severity and the physical tolls and traumas that it takes. But I think even for the traumas and things that like I had to heal from, and accept and look at, shame is shame, and it affects all of us the same. And I think that is so much of what my work aims to do on the other side, because I always say if you can get somebody laughing, then you have an audience. Meaning, like, even if it's one-on-one, like, if I can get you to laugh, no matter how different we are, like, I have an audience for that moment. Like, there is an element of trust, because laughter means, oh, I know what you're saying. Like, okay. And so there's that immediate sense of connection. But that's how I feel, where I'm like, we also don't create levity in any of these things. And, when people are in the absolute thick of it or hitting those rock bottoms, doing that, really heavy work, having all of those repressed memories come back. Like, I understand there isn't a lot of humor. And obviously comedy is time plus tragedy, right? So there does have to be some reflection time. But that is my biggest goal, I think, with the work that I do and as it's transitioned, is like, how honest can I be and it still be funny? Right? Like, probably the same thing for you, but on the other side, like, how honest can I be with this person and also not lose their trust in the 5 minutes I have them before they...
Yeah, where's the balance on transparency?
Right.
Yeah. Because I think engagement, for me as a nurse and as a therapist and as a faculty member, is to allow students and patients and audiences to feel safe enough to be in touch with what's happening. And it's not just sharing information, but how can we all feel safe enough together to tell the truth and to work through the truth and not lose anything along the way? Like, where is that balance? I think that takes a long time, sometimes a lifetime, to figure out. Where do I be transparent? Where do I not be transparent? But I was thinking about, when you were speaking earlier, how the different phases that you went through, like even how the universe gave me you, Dad and I were very academic and very goal-centered and goal-focused. And then it was like, here you showed up. I'm like, I don't know what to do with this kid. And grateful that I was always open enough to allow you to be exactly who you were. But, thinking about when you were 2 and Dad was going to build you a house for your 3rd birthday, and we were thinking, this is so great. And you're like, I don't want a house. I want a stage with benches so people can come. And we built you the house.
Yeah.
And do you remember what you did?
No.
You moved all the furniture from inside of the house out on the front deck, and you put the chairs out in front, and you had your stage.
Yeah.
And you were only 3 years old.
Yeah.
And so it was like that lesson after that was like, okay, she's serious about this. What are we going to do? And from that moment on, I learned to just give you the space to tell me what you needed, because I had no idea. I had no idea what to do with this funny kid who wanted to be on stage all the time. And I think allowing you to be that, you have no idea. I remember when you were in high school and you came home that one time and you were like, oh, something's wrong with me. Everybody wants to be teachers and doctors and nurses, and I don't want to do any of that. I want to be on stage. And there was a moment when you thought you were going to quit, like in 10th grade. And you were like, yeah, I think I should do something normal. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, please do nothing normal. Please keep going with this.
Yeah.
But there was a moment when I thought you were going to quit.
Yeah.
But I was like, the flip side of that is so many people quit doing what they really want to do. And then I see them in therapy later. And it's like, at what point do we split off from ourselves and erase those dreams? Because we always have to come back. I mean, when you're talking about full circle. So, and I remember then when you were 30 and you go, how much longer am I going to keep doing this before I get a real job? And then 2 weeks later, you got that gig that commercial or something. I can't
Oh
remember.
yeah, I booked my first television job on my 30th,
30th
birthday. I
yeah.
was walking into Vegas. A bunch of my friends went to Vegas for my 30th birthday. I don't think I've ever been that high in my life. I look back and
I remember you calling me. I remember where I was sitting when you called me and you go, Mom, what's with me and my birthdays?
Yeah. Well, that's why mine's coming up.
Right,
I was like,
yeah.
Mom, I've been getting all these auditions. And you're like, well, your birthday's coming up. I'm like, oh, yeah. My birthday is a very potent time.
But I think I was always your biggest fan in that I saw you at 2 telling me you wanted to be on stage. And then at 30, you're still doing it. Yeah. But I really wanted you to do it.
I really appreciate that you still think I'm 30 too. I think that's the biggest takeaway of that sentence for me. No, I really do appreciate that. And you don't understand, because even now, and Alex will be like, I'm your biggest fan. Okay, well, your mom is probably your biggest fan, but I'm tied. Like that recognition. But I certainly know that that's played a part, because it was never like, oh, like you can't do this, because the world is already like, it is really hard. Like when people, I have consulting clients and people come and they're like, I'm thinking about leaving my job and this is what I want to do. And I'm like, you absolutely can do it. I want to make sure that you are mentally and financially prepared for what is about to happen, because I have seen the most talented and funniest people I've ever met burn out because it is so hard. Some people get lucky and some people get a break. Shout out to all my friends that's happened to, right? I'm here for it. But, especially like Hollywood specifically, or even fandom, there's always going to be somebody younger. And now with social media, there's going to be somebody else who shows up and they're going to be, cuter, smaller, funnier, older, fatter, more marginalized than you. Like there's always going to be something. And I feel like I've just finally, probably in the last like 7 days, accepted the very raw reality where I'm like, oh, this is going to be a marathon. Like this is a life's work of what I'm signing up to do. And I've always known, even if I've wanted to quit, even times that I've slowed down or I chose drinking over going after my dreams, like the times I've self-sabotaged out of fear or, whatever else, like there was still always, like Alex is like, oh, you for sure have the compulsion. He's like, even more than me. He's like, you are a different person when you get to get up and be on stage and come home. You're a different person.
Yeah, definitely. But I think I created that. I was a part of the sacred space of allowing you to continue. Because I remember so many people over the years going, well, don't you think she should, do something else so she has something to fall back on? And I said, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Well, and then 2020 happened and you see all over again that it's like this illusion of stability is an illusion. I am not naive to the fact that obviously we have to pay bills. We have to, not everybody has a childhood home that happens to be available that they can take over. Like I'm hip to it, but I just mean when people are operating under the reality of like, oh, I've abandoned my dreams because now I want something that's more stable. I'm like, stable for who? You're fucking miserable, And I'm like, you don't get to dictate anything. You don't, and so I think for me, it's one of the biggest things I teach all the time is like, choose your hard, because you can work against yourself, or like you said, you can enjoy the ride of being in that pain.
And I think for both of us, our careers have been an evolution of trying to find our way, trying to find ourselves, trying to find our truth. And I was just telling somebody the other day, I can't believe my entire career as a therapist, how many times I wanted to be like, can I just pay you right now for the lesson you just taught me?
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of careers where you get to, or you have to look at yourself. I would say that would be probably the most truth out of the career that I chose. I could do this in a way that's like, welcome to McDonald's. Can I take your order, please? Or I can put my whole self in.
Yeah.
And as a therapist, it's like doing the hokey pokey. You can't just put your arm in. You can't just put your left arm in, your left arm out. You have to put your whole self in and shake it all about, because I've often felt that I couldn't ask you to do something when you were growing up that I wasn't doing, and I couldn't ask clients to do something that I wasn't doing.
Yeah.
Which is a real interesting part of the work. I can't. Maybe other therapists can, but I couldn't separate myself from the role as a mother and as a therapist.
Well, and I think that's what's so I mean, I understand both with bedside manner and then even like all of the, I'll just say, rules around being a therapist of what you can and cannot do and the engagement and things like that. And I know why they're there. Boundaries are important, obviously. Podcast for a different day. But to me, what really allows us to evolve as humans, what allows us to be okay, to sit in pain, is the recognition from somebody else that it's okay. Mm-hmm. And I think when that element is, so that's to me is what you're saying,
right?
Of like, you know, how could I ask that of you if I'm not doing it? And I think that is what gets so difficult, right? The more that we do this work, the more that we heal, the more that we look at, is it's not about perfection. And that's what I think is so interesting about these cycles, where like the amount of lessons that my body in the last month has taught me about how to listen to myself, that I'm like, oh yeah, here I am last week and I did a whole lecture on listening to your body, and then I've had all these health issues, and it's like, oh, isn't that so cute? So to me, it's like, I think that's another reason why within this healing space, there's like experts and coaches, and they're elite coaches, and they only mentor people that are in elite positions. And I'm like, it's bullshit. It's absolute fucking bullshit. I think you can absolutely be an expert
on yourself
and all, and all those things. But I'm like, you're denying, you are saying that you are impenetrable. And I don't want to fucking learn from anybody who says that.
So I think it's authenticity. And it's authenticity that I seek, have always been an authentic seeker of truth. But it doesn't mean I haven't gotten bogged down in my lifetime in situations or experiences where I'm like, I feel very confused, but I don't know why. But I don't have enough time to figure this out. So I'm just going to ride this out. And then I can reflect back later and say, yeah, I wasn't really fully present. And so now I'd like to change my opinion on that. But I think that someone asked me the other day, what would be my biggest takeaway after 40 years of working like this? And I said, doing the work myself. Because when people look at you and say, you have no idea how hard this is, I do. So I believe that my experience has been so much more worthwhile because I've stumbled and fallen and, tripped and stuff all along the way. But I always go, what just happened there? Let's look at that. Let's do over. Time out.
Yeah. Well, I also think it would be boring, right? It's funny because when you talk about that of like that you can really help people because you've been there. A few episodes back, we had my friend Renee, or Mystic Rain, who I would love for you to meet at some point. She's so wonderful. And she said that. She was like, that's the difference. When you choose to go in and you know pain and people come in, you can better navigate. And there's just a sense of presence, I think, that you can have with people. And it's that you can't have if you haven't done the work. And I also think that at least the thing for me, I'm kind of coming to this next level of perspective as I see it. It's not about consciousness. I'm not better than anyone, but meaning like I've now done enough that I can get in certain situations with people and I'm not as triggered because I'm like, oh, you think you're being perfectly authentic, but that is your authenticity right now. I have enough consciousness and done the work enough to know there might be a little different of a perspective, but I think it kind of allows me to not feel like I'm fighting for truth, if that makes sense. Like I have to remember, like, it's not my job to change the world. Like I'm not, you know what I mean? And like that my job is just to show up and do the work and then get on stage and tell people how I see it. And hopefully people laugh. And I know that means that that's the way they see it too. But,
and I think that for myself too, I've often said when I was in the role of clinician therapist, my role here is just to hold you still long enough to get in touch with your own truth. So it's not that difficult. I don't have to fix anything for you. I just have to listen and nod like you're doing now and create a space that's sacred enough for you to figure it out. And really, the reality that we even have therapists is because the world is spinning so fast and so many things are going on that 50 minutes might be the only time in your week that you've had to just slow down. Just slow down.
Yeah, I remember.
because it's all there.
What do you mean? Oh, like
everything is there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's another one of my mantras right now of like, simple is the solution.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like we lost grandpa, then 3 weeks to the day, I lost my grandma, my mom, or my dad's mom. And immediately I'm like, not only listen, we were so grateful to have them for as long as we did, 96 years and then 99 years and 9 months. Like we had a great run, but where it was like, we had just gotten home and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to get those boys back in the car. I've got to drag them all the way up there. There's another $3,000. There's like, and it wasn't about that I wouldn't do that for anyone I love, but it was like the mental load of being the mom and being like, holy shit, I'm about to, like, we barely made it through the last one. And then all of a sudden I'm like, or you could go by yourself. And that was fine for me. That rang true. But then it becomes, well, then is everybody going to look at me of like, well, why didn't she bring her family? And why didn't, like, where's her husband and what's going on? And then I'm like, that's the voice now that I'm learning to disattach. I'm like, I don't give a shit what anybody else thinks. If it is true for me and it is right for me, then that's the solution. And it's that simple. And I feel like,
well, what's funny with that is as soon as we learned that Grandma March had passed, I was like, well, Rachel will be coming up by herself. Like, I already knew that before you even had to do the struggle.
Yeah.
Like, no way could you do that again.
No. And why would I? Because again, we talk about reflection time.
You're right.
And there wouldn't have been any. Which I think was even why that...
Or you would have come home and had a meltdown yourself.
Well, I think I still kind of came home and had a meltdown, but maybe it wasn't as severe. But yeah, I mean, I think going back to what Renee was talking about in this pain where, you know, even when you talked about our own careers and how it's been this evolution of self. And a lot of times I'm like, thank God I didn't, a lot of the things that almost went early in my career didn't happen. Because I would have had to do all of this while upholding all of this supposed fame and the reality and what people want you to do. And I would have done all of it. And I would have sacrificed myself. And I don't even know if I would have gotten sober. I don't know. So it's like on this one hand, I would have had all these things that I thought I wanted, but then it's like, we're also not saying anything real. Like you're not, you know, and like, I mean, yeah, I have some jokes that are just to like make you laugh. So it's like, we're all having a good time. But I feel the same as you, where my hope is that when you leave, you know, my hope used to be you come to a show and you leave and I'm the funniest one you saw that night. That was always the goal. Even when performing with 8 exceptionally funny other people at Second City, my goal every night was like, I want to be the funniest one out there. And now the goal is, I hope you leave and you go, that was interesting. Like I hope that there's one thing that I leave you with that makes you laugh. And then you're like, oh, what else was that? Because I think that's just what I want to talk about. And I tried over the last year thinking it was going to be more spiritual speaking and it was going to be this, I'm like, okay, I'm going in and maybe comedy was the part of me that needed to be presentational and needed to be seen. And maybe I don't need that. And, you know, in some ways I think I've felt guilty because I'm like, oh my gosh, I spent all this money and built all these aspects of my business and now I'm not doing them. But same thing, I'm like, but you had to see if that's what you were supposed to do. And isn't it funny that you're back where it's like, no, you're supposed to do what you've known you were supposed to do the whole time.
Or you might circle back to some of those things too.
Or that they're not mutually exclusive.
And there's not the energy or the space for it right now, but it doesn't mean it's not going to happen later.
Yeah.
Or maybe nothing at all.
Yeah. Or just the reality of like, I think of this simplification, which is like, there isn't anything to manufacture. Like, why is it any less spiritual or true? Because it's hopefully followed by a laugh. Like, I think that's just my own, and I think that's a lot of people's barrier to entry with healing. Because with anything, you know, you say the word spiritual and people are like, oh, okay. Oh, this is a woo-woo. Okay, I'm not comfortable. And I'm like, but the things that make us feel the most tethered to earth in the middle of all of these things that go too fast are the things that feel the most sacred to us. And that's all I want to do is put people back in touch with those things.
Right. So maybe I'm going to be more funny in the classroom.
But you're pretty funny.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah.
I mean, an exceptional storyteller, because people always ask me. I mean, I think I'm a little goofy. Dad's pretty goofy.
Right. I was going to say you get more of it from Dad,
but he's very animated. But like, you know how to hold an audience. You also speak in a way of like an old, like revivalist sometimes. Like there's a very like syncopated way that's very methodical when you talk to groups of people.
well, I don't want to waste anybody's time. And that's something that's probably true is, again, putting my whole self in, whether I'm in the classroom, whether I'm next to a patient. And like you were saying, you want to come away with someone getting something or saying, what was that? I always felt that if I could spend some time with someone and they can tell me one truth that they haven't told anyone else, even if it's just a sentence, then I'm not wasting their time. No matter what's going on. Like, can I walk out of here? Also reflect on myself. How could I have said that different? How was my tone? Was I truly engaged? And did I make a situation safe enough that somebody could tell me the truth? And sometimes I saw people 3 or 4 or 5 times before they could tell the truth. But eventually, or a truth.
Yeah.
It's not easy to tell the truth in a big, huge hospital setting. You know?
I mean, it's not.
There's so much going on all the time. Just the experience in itself is overstimulating, you know, let alone somebody coming and go, so tell me about yourself. What's really going on?
Yeah. It's funny because when you're like, I have to reflect on, my tone and all that, I was like, well, that's everything I do after shows too. Other than making sure somebody told me the truth. I'm like, okay, did I slow down? Did I say the right words? How could I word that differently? What's the comedy math?
But the truth of all of it is, it's really not that difficult because, again, I always tell my students, when you're with people, learning to be with people, just think about people in your own life that you feel comfortable with. You can hang out with them on their couch or not. You don't have anxiety when you walk in the house, like I'm going to have to be somebody else, like your grandmother, or how it feels to wear your favorite shirt. Like, we want to emulate that with patients so that their truth can come through. Well, and I can't teach that. Well, I hope that I've mirrored that some in my career, but it's easy, and yet it's not that easy. How can I feel okay within myself to give permission for someone else to feel safe enough to tell the truth? Remember Truth Telling Tuesdays we used to have?
Yeah. But I feel like we're going to have to go back and tell everybody about that.
Circle back on that one.
But I think that, to me, that's just presence.
Yes.
When people are truly present with you, it makes a world of difference. Like, and I had to go to the doctor recently, and, we're trying to figure out what's going on with me. And where it was like, it literally was, I guess you could say placebo, but it was like, when I left, I felt so seen and heard that I was like, oh, I'm going to be okay. Mm-hmm. And by the way, there's nothing serious at all, but they have been very serious in my own life. But yeah, just it shouldn't have been that profound to me that a doctor of medicine sat long enough to talk to me, hear me, ask me a myriad of questions, gave me a solution in office, and then said, we'll come back in 14 days and we'll see how that solution's going. And then I'm also going to do all these tests and these other things, and you're going to be okay. Like, that should not be a profound experience for me at 37 years old. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing where I always say, right, like, interesting people are interested. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the thing. I mean, people that make you feel safe are the people who, they just want to listen. They look you in the eye. They slow down when you're there. They
nod.
And they let you know that they're really there.
Listening.
Mm-hmm. And that's why sometimes I always struggle with like the first 2.5 minutes of being on stage, because they say we as comedians, as teachers, as clinicians, we teach our audience, sometimes you're a one-on-one, a patient, how to view us within the first minute of being out there. And a lot of comics are like, it's laugh per minute. Like, you got to get out there and you got it. And I'm like, but I want them to trust me. And I want them to know I don't have to, like jump off on all these jokes. It's jarring. Like, we're just going to hang out for a minute.
Make sure they're on your train before the train leaves the
right.
station.
Like, I'm like, don't worry. I got us. We're going to have a lot of fun tonight. But right now, I just want to acknowledge I put makeup on. I don't have a child in my hand. And so for the next 15 minutes, we're just going to relax. Okay. You guys into it? Like, and even if it's not for them, like, again, that evolution, like, it's for me, of like reminding me in that moment, like, it'll make me emotional, where it's like, despite every single thing that's happened, like, you could look at it and be like, there's no reason why I should still be like, yep, this is going to work. We're going to do this. Like, I mean, on one level, like, it is working. I'm doing it. I'm getting paid to do it, whatever. But like, what I see for myself has not materialized yet. But what a beautiful thing that I've been able to like evolve with my work and what I want to do before, so that way when I do get to the place where there are, millions of people listening, I feel very confident in what I'm offering them, because similarly, I don't want to waste their time and I don't want to waste my own time.
Right.
What do you feel like has been the most gratifying? This is a selfish question. What do you feel the most gratifying part of being a mom has been?
All the things you've taught me. Even if I didn't have a career as a child therapist or as a nurse and having any kind of insight, you were not going to let me not see you.
What do you mean?
Well, like when you were 5 and you went to school and I changed your room around while you were gone, because I wanted your bed to be on the other side because of the window and it was cold, and you came home and you go, Mom, what'd you do to my room? Do you remember?
No, but
And
I know the story.
you were 5. And I said, well, honey, I just thought it would be good if we moved it around a little bit, make it a little more comfortable. Do I go into your room when you're at work and move your furniture around? And you were in kindergarten. And I was like, you were absolutely right. I should have asked permission. Or maybe we should have done it together.
Yeah.
So you weren't going to let me do anything else. I mean, you had that soul of connection of, that's not fair, Mom. I wouldn't do that to you.
Yeah.
And I was grateful for that, because, a lot of parenting is unconscious. You just think you're doing the right thing. And sometimes we're not. And I was always grateful that you were always, for the most part, strong enough to stand me up.
Yeah.
And that I wasn't so far away from it. Okay, let's move it back to the way that it was. And those are other moments that it helped me to listen. What do you want? What do you want to do?
I get that. Because I think in my experience, it's like wanting to have kids, I think because, I had a beautiful childhood. And my joke is always, I didn't know that you and Dad were divorced until I was 18, because we always did stuff together. And so then a lot of that trauma hit me later where I'm like, oh, holy shit. So I think a lot of that, the driving force for me of really wanting to make sure I chose wisely with, a husband and the father of my kids and all of that, whereas I was like, I really want to have a very strong family unit, and what a blessing, that's been, and all the grandparents get along and all those things. We know it's a very happy experience. But you also forget where it's like, sure, you're bringing 2 children who are their own. And I feel like I very much feel that way with Jonah. Teddy's not as old. He can't tell me as much. But energetically, Teddy's going to be the one's like, all right, Mom. Like, he's just a little bit more like, go with the flow. And Jonah, same thing, is very particular. And so right off the bat, where I was just like, all right, yeah, then we'll do it your way.
Right.
And my job is just to make sure you stay safe. That your way keeps you safe and it keeps you in a place of progression. And as long as that's what it is, then we'll do it your way.
Well, I remember counselor that I worked with at one of the hospitals I said, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with her. She's so different from me. Like, I was expecting, I don't know why, a duplicate. and you weren't.
Yeah.
And I said, she's interested in everything that I never had opportunities to do. She's interested in things that I don't understand. And I remember he said, just let her tell you. And that sentence carried me through until you figured out that this was going to be the way you were going to go. But I really didn't know what to do with you. And now that we have the boys, I'm like, what are you going to do? What do you got going on? And just allowing them to be exactly who they are. And academic-wise, things are a lot different than it was 30 years ago when you were in school. I mean, we do have situations now in classrooms now that allow for so many other parts of people, but keeping people in boxes, you lose your voice.
And 100%. I told you when we went to Jonah's, the orientation for his school, I got so emotional because it was 8-year-old Rachel who was literally like, oh, this is my place. Like the space that I never had. And, you guys know I do the Misfit Light, and that's all about like, what are all of the things that are so uniquely you and that we are supposed to do while we're here that get knocked out of us through, again, this idea of like stability and this is the way that we do it. And
tradition.
Yeah. So when you talk about like, hopefully you've mirrored enough, when you talk about that both with students and within our family, that's a big thing for me and what Alex and I talk about. And that's the biggest thing for me about slowing down, that I'm like, I'm going to mirror to Jonah and Teddy both. And it's a very hard learning curve for me right now, but it's like, when you attend to first things first, other things will wait. And even if they quote unquote pass you by, then it wasn't your train. And having that intrinsic and sacred trust that when we take care of first things first, that we will make wherever we need to go, because that anxiety is not real. And the feeling is real, but the fear or whatever, like that's not real. And, the more, that's just my biggest thing for them, especially for Jonah, because he is very much like me. I know he's not a carbon copy. He doesn't look a lick like me, but he is very much like me. I mean, never met a camera he doesn't like. He was in here jumping around, seeing himself. And, but I think that it also really helps me in my marriage too. That like, I often want Alex to be in a place that I want him to be. And it becomes that if the more that I just listen and I let him tell me and accept that that's where he's at, he always catches up to me, way far, or we meet each other. So I'm, wildly ahead of him or anything, but
wait, I really believe the whole world needs to slow down. And, the other day I was getting gas, and it's like, it's not enough that, you have to get gas, you have to go inside, you have to take all this in. Well, now we have televisions on the gas pumps, and everything's talking to you. And, it's like, I need a quiet place to get gas. Does anyone have a quiet gas station?
I know.
Like, everything is amped to where we're just like in a ping pong match, ping pong, stay out of your body, just keep running. And by the time you even get to work, after you've been through traffic and all the chaos that happens just even to get there, it's like, if you don't take a moment to reflect, you don't even have another moment until the next day. And then you start up and do the same thing. So how do we slow down the train long enough to go, what's going on with me? What's going on with me? Because everybody, it's like a 3-ring circus all day long. Go, go, go. And this is what we're fed so many times, that we think that, why am I not handling it like that person over there who's got 3 plates in the air? And I'm ready to throw all the plates and start screaming and pull my eyebrows out. And yet we just keep going. And we're right all along. What we're feeling is accurate. But believing in that and owning that takes time.
Well, because it's separating yourself from the pack. I talk about that a lot, of whatever you believe your truth to be or whatever is authentic to you, the reward, quote unquote, of doing the work is that inner peace. It's that accepting both the pain and the peace at the same time. But you'll find there's not as many people climbing that mountain, you know, and it becomes, it can be lonely sometimes, at least in my experience of being aware of how, I mean, that's when everybody's like, oh, you know, and it's not going to be a whole thing. I know there's a lot of hot button issues about autism, but where we're like, autism is caused by all these other things, or, you know, everybody has OCD now, and everybody has ADHD now, and everybody has, and I'm like, you know, depression, and everybody, and I'm like, right, maybe yeah, maybe we should look at that. Maybe we should look at what's going on to where all of us we are genetically changing what we can handle and what our capacities are. Mm-hmm. Like, I made a video about that the other day. I'm like, how many of us are just throwing anxiety on our back like a pack mule getting ready to go through the Grand Canyon, and we act like it's nothing. Mm-hmm. I'm like, we're all overstimulated. Mm-hmm. We're all like, you know, and I have to remember, this is something else I'm curious about with you, of like, because my nervous system is so sensitive and I'm so tapped into collective consciousness, sometimes that anxiety I feel in my body isn't even mine. Mm-hmm. And that's why I've had to get very religious about releasing that energy both in the morning and at night. Because that's what I start to feel if I'm scrolling and it's like, you should be doing this, you should be doing that, you should buy this, do you know about this? Don't eat this anymore, it's going to kill you. Like, all within 4 minutes. Mm-hmm. That used to be the amount of information that somebody would learn in a lifetime, maybe.
It's too much. I mean, just this morning I was doing a doodle poll, and there was so much advertisement on there. I got confused about which button I'm supposed to push, because I'm reading all of this and I'm like, wait, I just want to answer when I can show up for this meeting. And it's just, there's just too much. So we, just like in so many things, have to pull ourselves out. Because no one's going to do it for us. No one's going to stop. All of this overstimulation is going to continue. And we need to pull ourselves out. You know, how can I take care of me in light of all of this? Or do I want to get on the next train out of town? And how do we stop? And I remember feeling so much of that when my dad was sick, because I was like, oh no, I'm stopping everything. Because if I miss this moment of not being fully present, then what's the point? What's the point? But I had to pull myself out because, you know, my deflection and detachment in life is do more, you know, one more degree, one more job, one more volunteer experience. And it was really, honestly, the first time in my life that I stopped everything for a while. And it was the best time ever in my life, and I think in my dad's life as well, because nobody ever had me completely full on present. And it was great. Like, I wanted to sell T-shirts. Just slow down. I know, but put some lights in there, you know, like neon, so people can really see it. But again, it's not our place to get other people to slow down either.
I know.
And to stop the madness, it's like, I'm just going to go ahead and excuse myself. And I found even after Dad passed, it took me a good month, I would say, to go back out in public, walk up and down the grocery store. So much going on. I'm like, I've had so much peace.
You even live in a small town.
I know. I had so much peace and quiet that it hurt to hear all that again. So I had to ease myself in slowly. And I was only showing up for things that were absolutely important. Otherwise, I wasn't going.
Yeah, I think the more I become aware of, well, I want to first, before I say that, is go back to what you said about it's not our job to pull other people out of it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's also so much why I've found this merging of what I believe to be spiritual wisdom with comedy, because it's almost too hard to truly accept how far beyond ourselves we are and how simple it would be to fix, not to fix, but to heal, to live with, to allow, to move with the things that plague us entirely. Mm-hmm. It's not hard, but we'll never do it together. I always say that all my work is about healing the divide between society and self. because that's why we're so sick, because society says, go this fast, you can do it, everybody else can do it, you got to have this brand new car, you should buy something else from Amazon. Guess what? If you spend more money, we can get it to you in the next 7 minutes. Knock on the door, guess what? Now it's here. Like, and then we're going, well, I'm doing all these things and I feel worse than I ever have. And it's that space in between. Like, that's what's fucking us up. And it's like, no, you are right. You are right. And what is going to be right is going to be different for everybody.
Well, I remember saying that to patients over the years too, that when they come in, my mom, says this about me, my dad says this, my siblings say this, the job says this, I can't keep up. And it's like, well, maybe you're right. Maybe everyone else is wrong. And just the astonishment when people look at me like, what do you mean maybe I'm right? Like, how sad is that we get so knocked around that we think our thoughts or our experiences are wrong because everyone else doesn't agree with them. And then we have to spend so much time in therapy trying to get back to ourselves.
Yeah.
And why?
Well, because we don't have that time to slow down. And I think that's exactly why I'm like, I think I have to go back to making this all funny or presenting it through art, because speaking so plainly about it is frankly, it's too hard. Maybe somebody else could do it, but it's like there is even that sense of levity where it's like, all right, maybe I can get through this. And it's, because it is very real where like, I have to gear myself to go up into Target. There's so many people and everybody's going fast and everybody's being loud. Same thing where it's like, social media, all that. I'm very present on social media, but I don't scroll. I don't comment. Like I can't, it's too much. And now knowing like what my energy levels are and how much it takes to show up as a mom, to show up as a wife, to show up for myself. Let's start with that one first. And then show up for my business and all that. It's like the amount of which I have to go out into the world and be bombarded, much less do a doodle and get bombarded with ads, is like this much, And
well, there's always been times in my life, as there's been in your life, where you've gone down a different road, not on your own, but someone else made a decision for you, like you lost your job or you didn't get an audition or whatever. And our first reaction rather than responding is, why does this keep happening to me? And, I hate everything, but it's like, okay, let's just take a moment. Was I supposed to be on that road? And like you said earlier, so many times we could have gotten on a train that we're so grateful we didn't. We got on trains that we wish we hadn't. But sometimes things are just happening because that's the only thing that can stop us. And then what do we do with that? Do we heed it? Or do we go pushing through something that we're not supposed to be there for?
The wisest thing I've ever said in my entire life was after I went through my breakup when I was living with my boyfriend at the time. And my friend who was also living with us, long story, different podcast, different episode, and she was like, do you want to go out for a drink? Because that was where it was like, we had no money. Now we're in this breakup. What are we going to do? Like, we moved out to La La Land. Our lives are fucking falling apart. And so it was like, oh, we'll go out and drink and it won't matter. And I don't think that's exactly what she meant, right? But that's always the implication. And I just remember talking to you guys in the car. You guys are in the car and you're calling us, Mom, you got to fix this. We're both crazy. Yeah. That's in a pilot that we wrote, that entire scene. Yeah, we called you from the car and you were like, wait, what?
In case you'd be like, I want to talk now. I have a question for the therapist.
Yeah, I mean, it was wild. And in that...
But I didn't have your answers either.
Well, yeah, I mean, but isn't that interesting? I mean, that's the thing. And I think when people, again, going back to where my frustration is with like experts and this and that and everybody, and I'm like, listen, I get it. You got to market yourself. But I think the most real thing I can offer you is like, I've been there and I trust that you can do it too. And so my job is to hold the space and help you throw up what's happening. And then I can help you organize it. I can help you organize it and go, okay, this would be helpful. Can you get some support here? Can we put this on hold? Can we pick this up? Because I would say it's the same thing if somebody's been doing a crossword puzzle for too long and they can't find that last word. And somebody walks by the break room and they're like, oh, exclamation. You're like, how the fuck did you see that? It's because it's a fresh set of eyes, right? And so it's like, that is my job is to offer that. And then, but it's your job to do the work. I mean, I would be shocked the amount of people who come to me and they buy, 3 months and I see them for a month and then all that money and they never show up again.
It's like going to the gym.
Well, yeah. I mean, and I used to feel like, oh, should we do like email follow-ups? And I'm like, no, you paid for it. If you want to show up, you show up. That's not about shame or guilt, but it's also just about me where I'm like, it's to your point. I'm like, it's not my job to heal anybody and it's not my job to heal the world. I have these offerings and I have these things that I do, and people who, are ready to do the work and feel like I'm somebody that can help them do it, I'm here, but that's it. But yeah, the idea of just not having any time to catch up with ourselves, and I'm guilty of it, and that really guilty of it.
Well, I'm not.
Well,
even all the degrees I have were distractions.
Yeah.
I could have slowed down 2 degrees ago.
Well, and the other thing, yeah, how many do you have now? Including certificates?
4.
Okay.
5.
Okay. Well, I just still have my old theater degree. I hope I made you proud, Mom. But I think that for me, where I'm like, it's not that there are things that I'm running from now. Like that's what was happening when I was drinking. Like I'm not perfect. That's not what I'm saying. But like there isn't anything existing that I'm not aware of. But I think for me, it's still the fear of like, but if I don't, I've talked about this on a recent episode where I was like, I think because I had so many big opportunities when I was still drinking, but I didn't believe in myself and I didn't believe that I was worthy of it, that everybody else got to be number one and I didn't. That I self-sabotaged by not putting myself in those positions because I didn't believe. And now I'm like, oh, what fucking hogwash. Like, are you kidding? And it's not about being worthy. It's like, this is just what I'm here to do. It's not about, there's no ego involved. It's like, that's what I was here to do, is to perform and light up for people. That's my job. That's what I'm here to do. And so I think now I ran the opposite way, which is like, but now it's all on me to make it happen and I have to make up for lost time. So it all has to get done and here's how it has to get done. And so that fear of slowing down comes from, well, if I slow down, then I'm going to mess it up a second time. And so I've really had to sit with that and be like, but if you really sit with it, you don't believe that to be real. It makes your heart sad and you worry about it. And what does all this mean? But you should have enough, going back to where the conversation started, a full circle moment about full circle moments, that I've had enough full circle moments in my life. I've had enough redirection in my life and ended up exactly where I was supposed to be, that I teach people to trust the universe and I make all these videos and all this stuff. I'm like, but you don't even really believe it. Because if you really believed it, you would slow down. And that has been the biggest egg on my face in a very, very long time, of having to sit with that and really like lean back.
Well, just even to turn it all off. I mean, I joke that I have so many degrees because it was a distraction, but it really was. I just didn't know at the time. I thought I was just excited about education. But the truth is that it even comes down to the simple fact that for me, I do not like television. I don't like the television on as background noise. And, and I've had different experiences with televisions in my life that it's also a distraction. And a lot of times we don't even realize it. But I mean, when I think about times I've been uncomfortable at other people's homes, it's because the television is constantly on, which to me feels like I'm not allowed to speak. Are you going to interrupt the show? Or is somebody going to go, would you just shut up? And that's always made me really uncomfortable. Not that I want to go in and, projectile vomit my stuff all over the room, but just even having a space. It took me a long time to just realize I don't want the TV on. And guess what? It's my house, so I don't have to.
Yeah.
But sometimes people come and they're like, hey, your TV's not coming on. I'm like, that's because I don't know how to turn it on. And they'll be like, what do you mean? Don't you watch TV? No. And I'm a freak of nature and I got 2 heads and one's spinning around. And I'm like, I can't. I can't. And I also think it's because of the work that I've done, not the spiritual work, but when you listen to trauma 24 hours a day, it's your life, 10, 20, 30 years. It's hard for me to take on more. And that's what a lot of television is violence and overstimulation. But I really don't know how to turn my television on. And that's okay because it's my house, Yeah. And I think it's okay for me, again, in dosages. Once in a while, I'm going to binge on a Netflix thing. But I don't like a television. It's just one of my pet peeves as far as being able to engage with other people. For me, is so much more important than watching something on television. I'd rather take a nap.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And the first thing, because I just realized I do this a lot, I get excited and I don't finish the sentence. When Casey and I were in the car that day and she offered me that drink, let's go drink, the wisest thing I've ever said in my entire life was, I said, I think I'm going to hold off. I don't want to do this one the way I've done it before. And I had no idea that meant, again, my joke's always that I got sober on accident. I didn't think like, oh, I'm going to get sober and all the shit's going to come up for me. I just was like, everything is moving too fast. I somehow moved in with somebody who did not want to move in with me. We made it 7 months and now we have to live together and now you're here and my car is in the shop and everything.
Neither one of us are working.
Right. Like we're broke. Like I'm 30 pounds underweight. Like what are we doing? Everything is clearly moving too fast. My nervous system can't even take in food. It's shaking all the time. Like this is not the way I want to do this. And so when we talk about it's like finding those spaces and that our truth is all right there. Like luckily there was just enough insanity that had happened where everything fell to the floor. When it's when people call me and they're like, well, I don't know if you can help me, I feel like everything in my life's falling apart. I'm like, welcome to the best moment of your life. And that's how I feel. I'm like, the best place that you can be in is when everything is fucking falling apart. It's the best place to be because now we can consciously build what are all the things that you really want. And it's not that it's easy, but I think the more that we just accept that pain is pain, then we can.
And you can keep deflecting and keep running, but eventually it's going to catch up and it's going to be so much harder. I mean, even in sitting here with you today, I'm like, I just turned 62 last week and I love being 62, by the way. I love it. But I started therapy at 18. And that's like 40 years.
Yeah.
I cannot even imagine as many hiccups and as many detours as I've taken in my life, who I would be if I didn't do that work because every other day I still feel crazy.
I know. Well, and I think.
And I can't even imagine.
But I think that's exactly it where I'm like, again, with Choose Your Heart, like you're already going to not know. The more you grow, again, where it was like, I think the reason it took me so long to listen to myself this time around, what's so funny?
Just don't let me forget about electricity. Go ahead.
But it's like, I think that the reason why I let myself go so much and have had these health issues and everything that's going on is like, because I got to this point where I'm like, well, I have the capacity now and the tools to handle these things. So certainly, like, we'll just keep going. And then it's like, but even with those, like, you still have doing the work sometimes is not doing anything. That's also the work. And so that's just been an interesting experience. What were you going to say about electricity?
Well, I was just thinking about how a lot of times how we put, I can't go to therapy because I can't afford it. And, I have all these bills and I have all these things that I have to do. And it's like, can you afford not to do it? So to me, I remember saying this to people when you were growing up, that it is so important to me because I know what my trauma is to stay in therapy. I don't care if I'm not paying the electric bill. I will go to therapy first. So if your lights are on and you're not going to therapy, your neighbors can see that you're crazy. At least if the bill gets turned off and you don't have electricity, nobody sees you in there as you're working through this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, where is your priority? And my priority, because I knew what my experiences were, this has to be my priority. End of conversation. And fortunately for me, I've carried it all the way through because I had to do it. I couldn't just say, no,
Well, and when you said electricity, because earlier you said I've had a lot of experiences with televisions, which was a very interesting sentence to say. And then I remember the time that you were in grad school and you were napping.
I was thinking about this the other day. No, I was studying.
Oh, and you go, and I kept coming in, of course, because I was probably by myself and I was bored and I had to keep myself occupied.
I know, but this was because of the conversation you were talking about last night, how you try to carve out a space for yourself.
Okay.
And I was going to ask you last night, do you remember that I would tell you when I would come home from work, you got to give me an hour, unless the house catches on fire.
Yeah.
So take
but
it from
this
there.
time,
Yeah.
so I thought you were napping, but I guess you were studying. And I kept coming in and I kept coming in. And you got pretty stern and you said, Rachel, unless the TV is on fire, do not come back in here. And I went back out, and maybe 10 minutes later, I turned on the TV and it started smoking. And in my mind, I'm like, and I go back in and I don't even knock on the door. I don't think. And I just go, and you were like, Rachel. And I was like, the TV's on fire. And oh gosh, that was so funny.
It was. You were in kindergarten.
I was like, oh, was I that young?
Mm-hmm. That's when we were living in the house with the pink carpet.
I know. Well, I can still remember the
console.
The
TV.
console.
Yeah.
Which would be like really cool now and like vintage. But yeah, it's all interesting. What do you feel like, as we wrap up, what do you feel like is the most gratifying thing for you having now done all the work? Like, even though everything that you're still going through and working through that's difficult, what do you feel like, because when you talk about, I don't know where I would be if I hadn't done all this work, what do you think is the most gratifying piece knowing that you have done the work?
That I didn't run people over with my car.
That's a pretty good answer.
Yeah, I think the most gratifying, I mean, I don't have any, to the best of my looking at myself, ego tied up in this. I don't feel like I've climbed Mount Everest.
Right.
I feel that I did the work so I could be a better mom, a transparent therapist. There's just no way I could separate that from myself. So gratifying is sticking with it.
Yeah.
Sticking with it. I mean, I remember saying to people when you were growing up, I just want to be a step ahead of her. Like, if she comes to me with a question about the world, what do you got? You know, I just never wanted you to outgrow me, in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, in honoring myself, I had to stay in the game. And so that's why I kept going. Because I remember as a kid, like, thinking about people that quit, you know, like older people in my neighborhood or whatever. And I was like, I don't ever want to do that. And here, as I find myself in my 60s now, my 60th decade of life, I'm like, okay, what are you going to do now? You know, what else you got?
Yeah.
And I'm grateful that I can still see it that way. And instead of, oh, it's almost over, I'm like, oh my gosh, imagine what I'm going to do when I retire. I'm going to have a ball.
Yeah, dude, I don't know what you are going to do. You probably will start a revivalist. You're going to go on the road, pop up a tent in different cities.
No, but remember when I moved to Vermilion, you go, Mom, you're not going to run for mayor, are you? Remember?
I mean,
and then I was like, can I do that?
Yeah, it's great. Shout out Vermilion, Ohio.
I don't have that much. Well, I do have that much.
But you do really like the mayor right now.
I love the mayor.
You called me to read his newsletter.
It was really funny. But I don't know. I think the most gratifying thing is that I haven't stopped. And I never wanted to give up. And now I have grandchildren, but also just the commitment to myself.
Yeah.
You know, and even though days are heavy and, you know, we're losing a lot of people, I'm just like, get back up on the horse. Start riding the horse again, because eventually the breeze will come back and the sun will shine again and, you know, you can play in the mud. Yeah. Let's just keep going down this track. And having not done the work, I don't know who I would be today. I still don't know who I am today. Yeah. But I'm happy and I'm, you know, happy.
Amen. Yeah, I feel like I'm very much in the place now, especially with all the stuff that's been going on with me physically and all these things that have become conscious for me. And I was like, oh, now I have to do all of these things like for me. Like that was obviously where I was like, I don't want to do this way. Like choosing to not drink was obviously for me. I let go of decade-long friendships and relationships that, wildly codependent were they, but the most meaningful people in my entire life. I never could have imagined living without them. And, so obviously all of those things I did for me, to better for me. But it was like I had to kind of do all these things to like clear the slate, figure out who I am. And now it's like relearning who I really am. But then like now it becomes like the ownership, because it's like you still can't, why check in with other people? You teach that other people aren't going to get it. So like my joke all the time, I'm like, I could afford to listen to my own podcast more often. I could afford to listen to my own advice more often because it's great. It's good advice. But again, if you're not implementing it, if you're not living that way, and I think that's so much for me of this rest of this year, which is like, we're still going to build and do big things, but we've got to be doing it for us. And we've got to do it because the priority is us, and the priority is our stability, our happiness, our health. And because then that mimics and shows itself to every other aspect of our life. And that I want to be present for it. Like I really, really want to be, and I think about that, and it's like, if you know all your dreams are going to come true in whatever way that they manifest themselves, like, don't you want to fucking be present for them?
And even if they don't come true, don't you want to be present enough to think about why that's happening? And okay, well, what am I going to do next now? Look at this.
Yeah.
This is what I have.
Or,
so what am I
or the
do?
presence, of seeing what is available to you now. What is the opportunity that's here now? And loving it for me. Like I think the blessing of losing two grandparents 3 weeks apart was isn't it interesting that they lived that long and they were gone that fast and that close together? And this sense of like, I'm a spiritual teacher. I know all of these things to be true. I talk to spirits. I like all of these things that you couldn't convince me is not true. And then I'm still like, but this thing that's happening right now is the most important thing. It's like, it's not the most important thing. It doesn't matter. And just kind of like releasing all of that to be able to like really be present and enjoy this part of the ride, because I will blink and I'll be 62.
I love 62. I said I think I was excited about being 62 as I was 18.
That's cool.
And I think a big part of it is just, well, I made it to 62.
Yeah.
And I still got a lot of time left.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, anything else for the listeners?
No.
I'd say where can we find you, but we're not really on, although I am, my goal is when you retire is to get you on the speaker circuit. That's my goal. Maybe get you your own podcast. So we'll see. All right. Well, thanks.
And my goal is to get you in the classroom a little bit more and find the humor and
hey, I'm into it.
Students that have so much pressure on themselves.
I'm for hire.
Yeah.
I'm for hire. All right. Well,
All right,
we'll do
let's
it. Then we'll do another podcast. We'll talk about that.
All right.
Okay. All right. Thanks for coming.
All right. Thank you.
Bye. Was that the most fun? Oh, so fun. You guys, I'm so grateful that you got to listen in. I was so grateful that she said yes. I didn't know. A few weeks ago was her first podcast interview. And obviously my mom is a wonderful conversationalist. It's what she does with all of her teaching and speaking and everything else. But there was still a chance that she was going to say no. So she was a big get for the Rachel LaForce Show. I'm so grateful that you got to listen. My mom she's just the best and doing so many amazing things and holding me accountable. And so it really meant the most. And I'm so grateful that you all got to listen. I'm sure maybe even let you in a little bit more personally into my life. So thank you for listening. As always, if you like the show, please tell somebody, please, okay? Anybody, your vet, your dental hygienist, okay? An old enemy, I don't care. I'll take their download, all right? I'm an equal opportunity employer here at the Rachel LaForce Show. Coming up May 1st, I'm dropping my first half-hour comedy special. I kind of alluded to that earlier in the episode when we opened. It's called Tired Mom, and that's dropping May 1st. That's my 38th birthday, so please. Okay, birthday gift, you to me. Go download or subscribe to my YouTube. The link is in the show notes here. So you can subscribe to my YouTube and get ready for that to drop May 1st. I cannot wait for you guys to see this. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm heading to Boston in June. I'll be sharing more about that coming up. And as always, you can join us for the Misfit Light live on Instagram. The replay is available on all socials. And we're going to be moving in April to Monday evenings. I've been doing it in the morning, and I've heard from a lot of you, and you're like, evenings are better. So we're switching it up. That will be every Monday evening at 8:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All right. We're also going to be bringing the Misfit Light live to the greater Atlanta area this summer. So there's lots of moving and shaking coming up, and I'm really excited to share all of that with you. If you'd like to work with me, my books are currently open for creative consults. I have a couple of different angles and things that we work with. If you have any questions, wondering if this is for you or wanting more information, you can go to rachellaforce.com. You can also book a free 15-minute call with me and kind of pick my brain and go from there and see if it's for you. I also have available my hour-long, these are more spiritual sessions. This is the Misfit Light, the Misfit Path. So this is where we talk and kind of figure out, are you in alignment? Where do you want to go? Where does your highest self want to take you? What are your dreams? Where are you wanting to go? And kind of building a roadmap for you of where you are now and where you want to go. These are big and small goals, okay? So this is a reading that should last you anywhere from 6 months to 3-4 years, realistically. And that doesn't mean like you've come to me and it's like, now you're healed. Not saying that, but meaning just to kind of give you an idea of both the time and financial investment versus what you're getting out of it. So again, for all of those details as well, you can go to rachellaforce.com. I'm so grateful that you're here. I've been Rachel LaForce. You have been wonderful. Love you so much. Love you, mean it. See you next week. Bye.
Time, weather, and always pass.